Fukushima, Japan shuts down all nuclear reactors. Germany starts doing the same. And it seems that uranium may be finished as a source of energy. But our hunger for energy hasn't diminished. There are now 7 billion of us on this planet. And from now until 2050, we will use more energy than in all of human history combined. And uranium, the rock forged in the explosion of a star, crackles with an energy too tempting to ignore.
In fact, 1 tablespoon of uranium is potentially capable of making enough electricity to meet all the needs of an average-sized city for a full day, or your own home for about 500 years.
There are over 400 nuclear power plants in 30 countries and another 70 under construction. Nuclear power isn't going away. Billowing out of that chimney is not smoke, but water vapor. And it's not radioactive at all. In fact, the reading on my Geiger counter is, well, the lowest I've seen it anywhere in the world. Now, this nuclear power plant emits no carbon emissions at all. So, would you consider it green? Well, many are not convinced.
Global warming, an unwanted byproduct of the modern world. Created by our ever-increasing need for power. But how to keep the power flowing without all those nasty carbon emissions? The answer is closer than you think. The atom.
Apart from accidents, what could possibly be wrong with using uranium to generate power?
Safely harvested in the form of uranium and converted into an even more deadly, a more productive form, the atom provides an abundant source of carbon-free power. Although the waste products are lethal to almost all forms of life for thousands of years, we will sort that out later.
The way most nuclear power plants operate today, they use only about 5% of their uranium fuel. The other 95% is highly radioactive waste, so it must be stored for a very, very long time. Currently, the United States has 72,000 tons of nuclear waste, mostly stored in containers like these. Some of this waste must be stored for at least 100,000 years. The safety and security of this waste remains the responsibility of a company, a board of directors, and shareholders who will take responsibility for 100,000 years. But what if there was a way to use this waste? Dr. Leslie Duan is one of a new generation of nuclear engineers designing the next generation of nuclear reactor.
Most nuclear waste lasts for hundreds of thousands of years, and my reactor is able to take that long-lived waste and break it down and extract almost all of its remaining energy. And if you take all of that waste and put it into these reactors, you could power the entire world for about 72 years, even taking into account increasing demand.
How is your reactor design different?
It uses a liquid fluoride salt as fuel. So if you have an accident, it's able to shut itself down safely. Our reactor can run entirely on nuclear waste, it can't melt down, and it's cheaper than coal. I think that Fukushima gave us this renewed sense of focus almost, that we really need to work to improve these nuclear reactors. We know that there's so many benefits to the technology for making cheap carbon-free electricity, but it made us more aware of all the work that needs to be done to bring all of the plants into the future.
Leslie thinks her reactor is less than a decade away. But I wanted to know what it felt like living with one of the current reactors in your front yard.
For me, there's measured risk with being next to a power plant. There's measured risk with being next to any factory, chemical factory, right? Obviously, if there's something catastrophic that happens at a place like this, this place would be a dead zone for 50 years.
Rob and Shannon moved here in 2011, just after the Fukushima accident. So tell me about the siren. What's the idea with that?
It goes off every first Wednesday of every month, and it just goes for a while, and then it shuts off. They tell us it's just make sure it's still working.
Yeah, they're just testing them.
Testing it.
Have you ever heard it go off not on its schedule?
Yeah, the kids and I have heard it. We all just kind of stopped, and they looked at me, and it's just that fear of if it blows, what's going to happen to us? Or if there's a leak, what's going to happen to us? So just kind of panicked a little.
From what I understand, it's one of the cleanest forms of power that we have, and there's no pollutants. That's the upside. I guess the downside is if it doesn't, the two examples would be Chernobyl and Fukushima. But like I said, it's a measured risk.
Rob and Shannon might be right. The entire story of uranium is perhaps one of measured risk.
When I began this journey to understand uranium, I had to wear this badge everywhere I went. It measures my cumulative exposure to radiation. I've worn it here amongst some of the largest uranium deposits on Earth, where uranium is actually woven into the creation stories of a people who have lived here for thousands of years. And I've worn this badge into places where people may never live for hundreds of years.
I discovered how we took uranium, and one morning 70 years ago in the New Mexico desert, we unleashed the power of the dragon. The most savage thing we have ever built.
Men being what they are, wouldn't it really have been better if this thing hadn't been invented?
Of course you're right, Mr. Benson. The energy in the atom is the most destructive force the world has ever seen. It can also be one of the greatest blessings God has ever given us. Which is it to be? Because on that depends the future of mankind.
So what should we do with uranium? As a physicist, I'm tempted to say it's such a great source of power. It has such incredible energy density and has so many benefits that way. How can you ignore it? But after studying it, after searching the world and following the story of uranium, the feeling that I'm left with is that it's not ready to take over. And seeing how far renewable energy has come, that suggests to me that there are alternatives these days, and that we don't need to go with uranium. We don't need to risk another place like this.
And yet, every year, uranium treats disease, and every year saves more lives than it has ever destroyed, even including the atomic bombs. And just imagine a world where next-generation reactors could produce massive amounts of clean, safe energy.
We live in an age where the nuclear dragon has been unleashed. And where that leads us remains to be seen. But there is no such thing as a future without uranium.
Uranium had one last surprise for me. After all of the radioactive places I had been, what was the reading on my radiation monitor? Well, from natural background radiation, we all get an average of 2,000 microsieverts a year. And my reading was just 280 more. For me, the journey was worth the risk.